Rain had fallen for 3 days straight along the cliffs of Harrington Bay, turning the roads into rivers and the sky into a gray canvas of despair. The gates to the Ashford estate stood like iron sentinels at the edge of the world, where land met ocean and hope met reality. No one came here uninvited. No one except her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Cassidy Monroe stood at those gates, her hair plastered to her face, her thin jacket offering no protection against the relentless downpour. Her sneakers were ruined, her backpack soaked, and her pride had drowned somewhere between the bus stop 5 miles back and this moment. She had walked through the storm because she had no other choice. Because the eviction notice in her pocket gave her 72 hours to find rent money she didn't have. Because her younger sister's medication couldn't wait another week. Because desperation had a way of making impossible decisions feel inevitable. The walk had been brutal. Every step through the mud had felt like the earth itself was trying to pull her down, to tell her to give up, go home, accept defeat. Her feet ached in ways she didn't know feet could ache. Her fingers had gone numb an hour ago, but she'd kept walking because Riley's face kept appearing in her mind. Sweet Riley, only 19, battling lupus with a smile that could light up the darkest room. Riley, who never complained even when the pain kept her up all night. Riley, who deserved better than a sister who couldn't even keep a roof over their heads. The intercom crackled to life before she could press the button. State your business. The voice was male, clipped, automated in its disinterest. I'm here about the housekeeping position, Cassidy said, her voice barely audible over the rain. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. The listing I saw online. Silence stretched between them like a test she wasn't sure how to pass. Then, there is no position. Her heart sank like a stone dropped into the ocean below. 3 days ago, she'd been deciding whether to spend her last $20 on bus fare or food. She'd chosen bus fare. She'd chosen hope. And hope had led her here, to a dead end in a rainstorm. Please, she said, stepping closer to the camera, letting whoever was watching see the desperation in her eyes. I saw the listing online. I have experience. I worked at the Grandview Hotel for 2 years. I can provide references. The listing was removed 3 days ago. 3 days ago. The universe had a cruel sense of timing. Please, she repeated, and this time her voice cracked despite her best efforts to keep it steady. I walked here, 5 miles in this storm. I need this job. I'll do anything. Another pause. Longer this time. She could almost feel someone on the other side weighing her worth, calculating her desperation, deciding whether she was pathetic enough to help or pathetic enough to dismiss. The gate buzzed and slowly creaked open. She didn't hesitate. She didn't let herself think about what anything might mean or whether she'd just made a terrible mistake. She walked up the long, winding driveway, past manicured hedges that somehow remained perfect despite the storm, past marble fountains where water danced even in the downpour, toward a house that looked less like a home and more like a fortress built to keep the world out. The mansion loomed larger with every step. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the gray sky like mirrors. Stone columns supported a grand entrance that belonged in a European palace, not on the coast of California. This wasn't just wealth. This was the kind of money that built empires and crushed anyone who got in its way. The rain pounded harder, as if testing her resolve one last time. Her clothes clung to her skin. Water ran into her eyes, blurring her vision. But she kept walking. The front door opened before she reached it. He stood in the doorway, backlit by warm golden light that made him look like something out of a dream or a warning. Tall, easily 6'3", mid-30s, wearing a charcoal suit with no tie, sleeves rolled to his forearms in a way that suggested he'd been working but couldn't be bothered with formality. His face was all sharp angles, strong jaw shadowed with stubble, high cheekbones that could cut glass, eyes the color of stormy seas, gray-blue and penetrating. Dark hair, slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. But it was his expression that stopped her cold. Not cruel, not kind. Just empty, like he'd learned to feel nothing at all. You're the girl who said she'd do anything, he said. Not a question, a statement. His voice was deep, controlled, the kind of voice used to giving orders and having them followed without question. Cassidy lifted her chin despite the water dripping down her face, despite looking like a drowned rat standing before a king. I need work. You need help. That's not desperation. That's practicality. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't asked to solve, but found mildly intriguing nonetheless. What's your name? Cassidy Monroe. How old are you, Cassidy Monroe? 23. References? I worked at the Grandview Hotel for 2 years before it closed last month. I can clean, cook, manage schedules, handle inventory. I'm reliable. I'm discreet. And I don't quit. And yet you're standing on my doorstep, soaking wet, clearly broke, begging for a job I didn't advertise. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over his chest, studying her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. Tell me why I should let you inside. She swallowed hard. This was it. The moment that would determine whether she went home with hope or defeat. Whether Riley got her medication or went without. Whether they had a home next week or joined the growing number of people sleeping in their cars. Because I'm not here to waste your time, she said, meeting his gaze directly even though everything in her wanted to look away. I'm not here to steal or scheme or get close to you for some hidden agenda. I'm here because I need to survive, and I'm willing to work harder than anyone you've ever hired. You don't have to trust me. You don't even have to like me. Just give me 1 week to prove it. He stared at her for a long moment, rain hammering the ground between them. She could see something flicker behind those steel-gray eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. Something that suggested he understood desperation more than his expensive suit implied. 1 week, he said finally, stepping aside. But understand this. I don't do second chances. I don't do mercy. You fail, you're gone. You lie, you're gone. You ask questions about my life, my business, or anything else that isn't directly related to your work, you're gone. Are we clear? Crystal. Good. He gestured inside with a slight tilt of his head. I'm Julian Ashford. You'll address me as Mr. Ashford. Nothing more, nothing less. Cassidy stepped into the foyer, and warmth immediately wrapped around her like a blanket she didn't deserve. The house was stunning. Impossibly high ceilings with exposed beams, modern art on the walls that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the turbulent ocean below. A grand staircase curved upward to the second floor, its railing gleaming with polish. The floor beneath her ruined sneakers was white marble, and she watched in horror as muddy water dripped from her clothes, leaving dirty puddles. But despite its beauty, it felt cold, empty, like a museum where no one lived, only existed. Julian closed the door behind her with a decisive click that sounded like a lock snapping into place. Your room is on the second floor, east wing. Third door on the right. You'll find towels in the bathroom, and there's a uniform in the closet. Shower, change, and meet me in the kitchen in 30 minutes. We'll discuss your duties then. He started to walk away, his footsteps echoing against marble floors like gunshots. Then he paused, turning back to look at her over his shoulder. And Cassidy? She turned. Don't make me regret this. She watched him disappear down a hallway, his tall frame moving with the confidence of someone who owned not just this house, but probably half the world. Her hands were still trembling, from the cold, from fear, from relief, from something she couldn't quite name. She had no idea that within these walls, she would discover that Julian Ashford wasn't just a reclusive billionaire. He was a man haunted by a betrayal so deep it had frozen his heart solid. And somehow, without meaning to, she was about to become the only person who could thaw it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The room he'd given her was larger than the entire apartment she shared with Riley. A king-sized bed dominated the space, covered in white linens that looked like clouds. The bathroom had a rainfall shower and marble countertops. The closet held not just one uniform but 3, all in her size, as if he'd known she'd say yes. Or as if other maids had come and gone. She stood under the hot water for longer than she should have, letting it wash away the cold and the fear and the exhaustion. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel softer than anything she'd ever owned, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Pale, thin, dark circles under her eyes from too many sleepless nights. But alive, still fighting. The uniform fit perfectly, a simple black dress with a white collar, practical yet somehow elegant. She toweled her hair dry, pulled it back into a ponytail, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was as impressive as the rest of the house. Commercial-grade appliances, granite countertops that stretched for miles, a center island big enough to host a dinner party. Julian stood by the window, looking out at the storm, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "You're punctual," he said without turning. "Good." She waited, hands clasped in front of her, not sure if she should speak. "Your duties are straightforward," he continued, finally turning to face her. "You'll maintain the main living areas, kitchen, dining room, living room, my office. My bedroom is off limits unless I specifically request otherwise. I rise at 5:30. Coffee needs to be ready by 5:45. Black, no sugar, in the ceramic mug you'll find in the top left cabinet. Breakfast at 7:30. Lunch I typically skip. Dinner at 7. I don't entertain guests, so you won't be expected to serve parties or handle visitors." He took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving her face. "I work from home most days. When I'm in my office, you don't disturb me unless the house is on fire. Literally on fire. I value my privacy and my routine." Questions. "What would you like for breakfast?" He seemed surprised by the practical nature of her question. "Toast. 2 eggs over easy. Fresh fruit, if available. Nothing complicated. Dietary restrictions? No. Allergies? No. Preferred cleaning products? Any surfaces that require special care?" He set his glass down, studying her with renewed interest. "You're thorough. I told you I'm good at my job." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but perhaps the memory of what one felt like. "There's a manual in the drawer by the refrigerator. Everything you need to know about the house is in there. If you have questions beyond that, you can ask." "Thank you, Mr. Ashford. Your salary will be $3,000 a week, paid every Friday. Room and board included. You'll have Sundays off." Her breath caught. $3,000 a week. That was more than she'd made in a month at the hotel. That was Riley's medication covered. That was rent with money left over. That was hope made tangible. "That's very generous," she managed. "It's fair compensation for the isolation and the demands of the job. Most people don't last 2 weeks here." "Why not?" He picked up his glass again, swirling the liquid inside. "Because I'm not easy to work for. Because the silence drives them crazy. Because they want connection, conversation, humanity. I don't offer any of those things. I'm not most people." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "No," he said quietly. "I'm beginning to see that you're not." Cassidy learned the rhythm of the Ashford estate within 48 hours. Julian rose at 5:30 every morning without fail, like clockwork. She could hear his shower running in the master suite, hear his footsteps on the stairs at exactly 5:42. By 6, he was in his private office on the 3rd floor, door closed, conducting business with people across time zones. She could hear his voice sometimes through the heavy door, sharp, decisive, brooking no argument. Coffee had to be ready at 5:45, black, no sugar, served in a specific ceramic mug that sat alone in the cabinet like it had been chosen for a purpose she didn't understand. The mug was simple, dark blue, slightly chipped on the handle. Everything else in the house was perfect, pristine, expensive. But this mug was different. Worn. Loved once, maybe. Breakfast was at 7:30, served in the formal dining room, even though he ate alone. Toast, 2 eggs over easy, fresh fruit arranged artfully on the plate. No conversation. He read financial reports on his tablet, while she moved silently around the kitchen, and the only sound was the clink of silverware against porcelain and the distant roar of the ocean. She didn't mind the silence. She'd expected coldness. What surprised her was the order of it all, the precision, the control, the way everything in his life seemed calculated to keep chaos at arm's length. There was something almost peaceful about it, like a monastery where the only religion was routine. On the 3rd morning, as she was dusting the living room, she noticed a photograph on the mantel. A younger Julian, maybe 28 or 29, actually smiling, genuinely smiling. Not the corporate smile she'd seen in the business magazines she'd looked up online. His arm was around a stunning woman with auburn hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and emerald eyes that sparkled even in the still photograph. She wore a diamond ring that caught the light. They looked happy. They looked in love. The frame was face down when she came to dust the next day. She said nothing. She carefully set it upright, dusted around it, and moved on. The day after that, it was face down again. She left it that way. By the end of the first week, Julian left her a note on the kitchen counter in sharp, precise handwriting. Eggs were perfect. Contract extended. No praise. No warmth. Just acknowledgement. But for Cassidy, it was enough. That night, she called Riley from her room, her voice bright with relief. "We're going to be okay. I can send money for your medication. For rent. For everything. Cass, you sound different. Lighter. I'm just glad I can help. No, it's more than that. You sound hopeful." Cassidy looked out her window at the ocean, at the way the moonlight turned the waves silver. "Maybe I am." The second week, things shifted. It started small. Julian began staying in the dining room an extra minute after breakfast, his tablet forgotten beside his plate. She'd catch him watching her as she cleared dishes, his expression thoughtful, almost curious. On Tuesday, he asked, "Where did you learn to cook?" It was the first personal question he'd asked. "My mother," Cassidy answered, surprised. Before she died, she worked as a chef. Small restaurants mostly, but she loved it. She used to say that food was love made visible. He was quiet for a moment. "She sounds like she was a good person." She was. She would have liked this kitchen. Would have done amazing things in it. "How long ago?" "For years." "Cancer." "I'm sorry." "Thank you." It wasn't much, but it was more than silence. On Wednesday, she was reaching for a serving dish on the top shelf when she felt him behind her. She hadn't heard him enter the kitchen. He was just there. His presence filled the space like gravity, like the air itself changed when he was near. "Let me," he said, his voice low and closer than she expected. He reached over her shoulder, his chest nearly brushing her back, and pulled the dish down with ease. For a moment, neither of them moved. She could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the faint scent of his cologne, something woodsy and expensive with notes of cedar and bergamot. Her breath caught in her throat. Every nerve ending seemed suddenly, painfully aware of how close he was. He stepped back abruptly, as if he'd touched fire and just realized he could burn. "Thank you," she whispered, not trusting her voice to be steady. He said nothing, just walked out, his shoulders tense. But that night, she noticed he stayed in the dining room longer than usual. Not reading, not working, just sitting, staring out at the ocean, at the way the sunset painted everything gold and purple and impossible. She brought him tea without asking, set it down beside him gently, not wanting to disturb whatever thoughts held him captive. "You don't have to do that," he said quietly, not looking at her. "I know." He looked up at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than ice in his eyes. Confusion, maybe even curiosity, maybe even loneliness. "Why are you still here?" he asked, and the question sounded genuine, like he truly didn't understand. "You haven't fired me yet." "That's not what I mean." He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Most people can't handle the silence, the isolation. They make excuses and leave within days." The last maid lasted 3 days before she said she couldn't take it anymore. "Maybe I'm not most people." His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping. "No, you're not." The air between them felt heavy, charged with something unspoken and electric. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured carefully, knowing she might be crossing a line. "Depends on the question. Why do you live like this? Alone in a house big enough for 20 people, working yourself to exhaustion, shutting everyone out." He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the darkening ocean. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Because people disappoint. Silence doesn't. Not all people. Enough of them." His voice turned sharp, defensive. "You don't know what it's like to trust someone completely and watch them destroy everything you built. To look in their eyes every day and believe their lies. To wake up one morning and realize the person you loved never existed." She sat down across from him, uninvited, but he didn't tell her to leave. "You're right. I don't know that. But I know what it's like to be invisible. To feel like you don't matter to anyone. To lose the people who made you feel real." He studied her face, searching for something. Honesty, maybe. Or understanding. "And yet here you are? Choosing to stay in a house with someone who barely speaks to you. Who offers nothing but a paycheck and silence. At least you're honest about it," she said softly. "Most people pretend to care and disappear when it's inconvenient. You never pretended." There's something refreshing about that. Something safe. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. like he'd never considered that his coldness could be interpreted as a form of honesty. "You're strange, Cassidy Monroe." "I'll take that as a compliment, Mr. Ashford." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close enough to make her heart stutter in her chest. He stood, taking his teacup with him. The first time he'd accepted anything she'd offered beyond what was required by her job. "Good night." "Good night." As he walked away, she noticed he paused at the door, just for a second, as if he wanted to say something more. But then he continued on, and the moment passed. It was a small thing. But small things, she was learning, mattered most in a house built on silence. And somewhere in the space between his walls and her persistence, something fragile was beginning to grow. Something neither of them had names for yet. Something that felt dangerous and inevitable and completely terrifying. The storm that rolled in during the third week was unlike anything Cassidy had seen since arriving at Harrington Bay. The weather reports had been warning about it for days. A massive system moving up from the Pacific, bringing winds that could tear trees from the ground and rain measured in feet rather than inches. Thunder shook the windows like fists demanding entry. Lightning split the sky in jagged white fractures that made the world look broken. The power flickered twice before dying completely, plunging the estate into darkness so complete it felt like being swallowed. Cassidy fumbled for her phone, using its dim light to navigate down the hallway. The house felt different in the dark, less like a museum and more like a living thing, groaning and creaking with the wind. She found Julian in his study, standing by the window, silhouetted against the flashing sky. A single candle burned on his desk, casting dancing shadows across the walls. "The generator should kick in soon," he said without turning, somehow knowing it was her. "I'm not worried. You should be. This house has a way of feeling haunted in the dark." She stepped further into the room, her phone light casting strange shadows on the walls. "Are you afraid of ghosts, Mr. Ashford?" "No." He turned to face her, his features half hidden in shadow, half illuminated by lightning. "I'm afraid of the things that haunt us while we're still alive." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the controlled, distant man she'd been working for. This was someone unguarded, raw, exposed by darkness and isolation. "What haunts you?" she asked softly, setting her phone down, letting the candlelight be enough. He was quiet for a long moment. Thunder rolled overhead like an answer he couldn't give. Then, slowly, as if the words were being pulled from somewhere deep, her name was Natalie. Cassidy waited, not speaking, letting him decide if he wanted to continue. "We met at a charity gala 5 years ago. She was brilliant, beautiful, charming. Everything I thought I wanted. We were engaged within a year." He laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the darkness. "I gave her everything. My trust, my company passwords, access to my accounts, to my life. I thought we were building something together." Another flash of lightning illuminated his face, and she saw pain there, carved deep. "She sold proprietary trading algorithms to my biggest competitor for $3 million. By the time I discovered it, she'd disappeared. The company nearly collapsed. I lost investors, clients, credibility. The board tried to oust me. It took 2 years to rebuild what she destroyed in a weekend." "I'm so sorry," Cassidy whispered. "Don't be. I learned my lesson. People are transactions. Everyone wants something. Love is just another currency, and I was too stupid to see the exchange rate." "Not everyone." He moved toward her, and suddenly the space between them felt impossibly small. "Dangerous. Electric. Then what do you want, Cassidy? Really want?" Her breath hitched. "I told you. I want to survive." "No." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the golden flecks in his gray eyes, close enough to feel the heat of him. "That's what you needed when you arrived. But you're still here. The contract's been extended twice. You've had opportunities to leave, to find something closer to your sister, easier, less isolated. So tell me, what do you want now?" The question hung in the air between them, dangerous and electric and completely unavoidable. "I want." She swallowed hard, her heart hammering. "I want to stop feeling invisible." "You're not invisible," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I see you every time you walk into a room. I notice when you move the books in the library to organize them by color instead of author. I know you hum old jazz songs when you think no one's listening. I know you check on me at night before you go to bed, standing outside my door like you're making sure I'm still here, still breathing, still alive." Her face flushed hot. She hadn't realized he knew. Hadn't realized he'd been paying attention. Julian. She stopped herself, the name feeling strange on her tongue after weeks of Mr. Ashford. I'm sorry, Say it again. What? My name. You've never said it before. Say it again. Julian. It came out like a confession, intimate and raw. Something in his expression cracked open, like ice breaking under pressure. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, calloused and warm and trembling slightly. This is a mistake, he murmured, but he didn't move away. Probably, she whispered back, but she didn't move either. I'll ruin this. I ruin everything I touch. Then ruin me. The words left her mouth before she could stop them, reckless and honest and entirely true. She'd never wanted anything more than she wanted this. Wanted him. Wanted to be the thing that broke through his walls. For one suspended moment, neither of them moved. The storm raged outside. The candle flickered. The world held its breath. And then his restraint shattered. He pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was anything but gentle. It was desperate, hungry, like he'd been drowning for years, and she was air. Like he'd been frozen, and she was fire. Like he'd been dying, and she was the only thing keeping him alive. She responded with equal intensity, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer, wanting more, needing more. Her back hit the bookshelf behind her, books tumbling to the floor, forgotten. He broke the kiss, breathing hard, his forehead pressed against hers. Tell me to stop. No. Cassidy. I said no. She looked up at him, her eyes fierce, unflinching. I'm not her. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to lie to you. And I'm not going anywhere. He searched her face, looking for doubt, for deception, for any sign that this was another mistake waiting to happen, another betrayal in the making. But all he found was truth. Raw, terrifying, undeniable truth. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, his voice breaking. I don't know how to let someone in without destroying everything. I don't know how to love without losing. Then we'll figure it out together. She cupped his face in her hands, her thumbs brushing his cheekbones. You don't have to be perfect, Julian. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be real. Be here. Be with me. Something inside him broke then, not shattered, but opened. Like a dam finally giving way after holding back too much for too long. I can't promise I won't mess this up, he said, his voice raw. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for a chance. He kissed her again, slower this time, more deliberate, like he was memorizing the taste of her, the feel of her, the reality of her. When he lifted her onto his desk, scattering papers to the floor, she wrapped her legs around him without hesitation. His hands moved under her shirt, trembling slightly, like he was afraid she might disappear if he held her too tightly. Like she was made of glass or smoke or dreams. Stay, he whispered against her neck, his lips trailing fire across her skin. Please stay. I'm not going anywhere, she promised, her fingers threading through his hair. I'm right here. I'm real. I'm yours. And as the storm raged outside and the candle burned low, two people who had spent so long building walls finally let them fall. In the darkness, they found light. In the silence, they found words. In the isolation, they found each other. The generator never did kick in that night. But neither of them noticed the darkness anymore. They were too busy discovering what it felt like to finally be seen. The morning after the storm, Cassidy woke in Julian's bed, wrapped in sheets that smelled like cedar and bergamot and him. Sunlight poured through the windows, painting everything gold, and for the first time in years, maybe ever, she felt something close to peace. Complete, unfiltered peace. She reached across the mattress, but he was already gone. The sheets were cold where he'd been. She found him in the kitchen, fully dressed in a charcoal suit, phone pressed to his ear, his expression carved from stone. The transformation was jarring. This wasn't the man who'd whispered her name like a prayer last night. This was Julian Ashford, billionaire, businessman, untouchable. I don't care what the board says. Find out who leaked it and handle it. I want names by noon. He ended the call, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle twitching. What's wrong? She asked, her voice still rough from sleep. He looked at her, and the warmth from last night was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating and frighteningly familiar. Get dressed. We need to talk. Now. The word now hit her like a slap. 20 minutes later, They sat across from each other in his office. The same office where they'd fallen into each other's arms. Where he'd kissed her like she was oxygen. Where everything had changed. He slid his laptop toward her. On the screen was a tabloid article with a headline that made her stomach drop. Billionaire Julian Ashford's secret romance. Who is the mystery maid? Below it were photos. Grainy. Taken from a distance, but unmistakably them. Her arriving at the estate soaking wet, looking desperate and broken. Him standing in the doorway, backlit and powerful. Another of them visible through the kitchen window, standing close, his hand on her face. Another through his office window, intimate, damning. How did they? Someone's been watching the property, Julian said, his voice devoid of emotion, back to the automated distance of their first meeting. The photos were sold to 3 different outlets. By tomorrow morning, your name will be everywhere. Your face will be on every gossip site, every tabloid, every social media platform. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the article. They dug into her background with ruthless efficiency. The eviction, her sister's medical bills, the hotel that closed, her mother's death. Everything painful and private, now public consumption. They'd painted her as a gold digger, a manipulator, someone who'd targeted a vulnerable billionaire with calculated precision. This isn't true, she whispered, her voice breaking. None of this is true. I never. It doesn't matter if it's true. He stood, pacing like a caged animal. My legal team is working on takedowns, but the damage is done. My investors are calling. The board is questioning my judgment again. And your face is now attached to mine in the worst possible way. I never wanted this. I know. He stopped pacing, his back to her, his shoulders rigid. But it's here anyway. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating and final. What are you saying? She asked, though she already knew. She could feel the walls going back up, brick by brick, higher than before. He turned to face her, and his expression was the same one she'd seen the first day. Empty, guarded, unreachable. The man who'd held her last night was gone. I'm saying this was a mistake. I let my guard down, and now we're both paying for it. So that's it. One article, and you're done? One moment of bad press, and everything we. It's not just one article, Cassidy. It's my company. My reputation. Everything I've spent the last 3 years rebuilding after Natalie destroyed it. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. I can't go through that again. I'm not her, Cassidy said, standing, her voice rising. I'm not trying to destroy you. I didn't sell those photos. I didn't call the press. I didn't ask for any of this. I know that. Then why are you pushing me away? Because staying close to me will ruin you. His voice rose, cracking with something raw and desperate. They'll tear you apart. They'll dig up every painful moment of your life and put it on display. Your sister, your struggles, your mother's death, everything. They'll make you hate yourself. They'll make you hate me. And I can't protect you from that. I can't even protect myself. I don't need you to protect me. I need you to trust me. Trust isn't enough. Not in my world. Not when everything I touch turns to ash. She felt something inside her chest fracture, a clean break that she knew would never heal quite right. Then what was last night? What were all those mornings, those conversations, those moments when you looked at me like I actually mattered? A lapse in judgment. The words hit her like a physical blow. She stepped back, blinking away tears she refused to let fall in front of him. You're a coward. His expression didn't change. Maybe I am. You're so terrified of being hurt again that you'd rather be alone than take a chance on something real. You'd rather live in this beautiful, empty prison than risk feeling anything at all. Maybe that's true too. No. Her voice shook with anger now, not just hurt. You're lying to yourself. You're pretending you don't care because caring means risk. But I see you, Julian. I see the man who sits by the ocean at night because it's the only thing that doesn't expect anything from him. I see the man who kept my tea mug separate from all the others because it mattered that it was mine. I see someone who's been so hurt, he forgot how to live. And now you're choosing to stay that way. Stop. No. She moved closer, refusing to let him retreat. You told me I wasn't invisible. Well, you're not either. And running from this, from us, from anything real, won't change that. It'll just make you more alone. He looked at her, his eyes filled with something between agony and anger, grief and rage. I'm asking you to leave, Cassidy, for your own good. And if I don't want to, then I'm telling you to leave. Effective immediately. His voice was flat, final. I'll pay you through the end of the month. I'll give you a reference. I'll write you a check for $10,000 to help with your sister's bills. But you can't stay here. The finality in his voice shattered whatever hope she'd been holding on to. She nodded slowly, tears finally spilling over, hot against her cheeks. Fine. I'll pack my things. She walked to the door, then stopped without turning back. Her hand on the doorknob, her heart breaking with every breath. For what it's worth, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I fell in love with you anyway. Even knowing this is how it would end. Even knowing you'd choose your walls over everything real. I fell in love with the man you could be, the man you were for just one night. And I'm sorry that terrifies you more than anything else. She didn't wait for his response. She walked out, climbed the stairs to her room, and packed the same small bag she'd arrived with 3 weeks ago. An hour later, she stood at the gate she'd first entered in a storm, desperate and soaked and hopeful. The sky was clear now. No rain, no storm, no clouds. Just empty blue stretching endlessly, indifferent to heartbreak. She took one last look at the mansion on the cliff. Somewhere inside, Julian was probably already back at work, burying himself in numbers and deals and anything that didn't feel like what they'd had. She walked away from the Ashford estate, from the man who'd taught her what it felt like to be truly seen, and from the first place that had ever felt like home. Behind her, Julian stood at his office window, watching her go, his hand pressed flat against the glass. His reflection stared back at him, alone again, safe again, empty again. Neither of them knew that walking away would be the thing that finally broke them both. Or that sometimes, the hardest part of love isn't falling. It's having the courage to stay fallen. Cassidy returned to the small apartment she shared with Riley in the city. The medical bills were still there, stacked on the kitchen table like accusations. But now there was money, Julian's check for $10,000 plus her salary. Riley's medication was covered. The rent was paid. They were surviving. But surviving wasn't the same as living. Riley noticed immediately. She'd always been perceptive, even when the lupus made her tired, even when the pain kept her up at night. You're different, she said one evening, curling up next to Cassidy on their worn couch, watching her sister stare blankly at the television. I'm fine. You're heartbroken. Cassidy didn't deny it. What was the point? Riley could read her like a book written in their shared language of loss and survival. Do you want to talk about it? Not really. Did he hurt you? No. Yes. I don't know. Cassidy pulled a blanket tighter around herself. He saved me and ruined me at the same time. Riley squeezed her hand. That's called falling in love. Then I never want to do it again. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Because every morning she woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. Every cup of coffee reminded her of 5:45 mornings. Every sunset made her think of sitting across from him in the dining room, sharing silence that felt like communication. Days blurred into weeks. She found work at a small cafe downtown, serving coffee to strangers who never looked her in the eye, never saw her, never tried. At night, she lay awake remembering the sound of the ocean, the warmth of Julian's study, the way his voice softened when he said her name like it was something precious. She told herself she'd done the right thing by leaving. That staying would have destroyed them both. But knowing something logically didn't make it hurt less. Didn't make her chest ache less. Didn't make her feel less like she'd left half of herself behind on that cliff. Meanwhile, Julian Ashford was unraveling. His assistant, Margaret, a woman who'd worked for him for 10 years and seen him through the Natalie disaster, noticed first. Mr. Ashford, you've missed 2 board meetings this month. Reschedule them. You've already rescheduled them. 3 times. He stared at the papers on his desk, seeing nothing. Then cancel them. Julian. She used his first name, which she only did in private, which she only did when she was worried. What's going on? Nothing. But everything was going on. Everything was falling apart in slow motion. Meetings ran long because he lost focus mid-presentation. Coffee went cold and untouched on his desk. He stood at his office window for hours, staring at nothing, his mind thousands of miles away from quarterly reports and board decisions. He tried to bury himself in work, but the numbers blurred. The algorithms didn't make sense. The deals felt meaningless. He tried to return to his old routine, but the silence that had once been peaceful now felt suffocating. The house echoed with her absence. Her mug still sat in the cabinet, and he couldn't bring himself to move it. Couldn't bring himself to use it for anything else. At night, he walked the halls and heard phantom humming. In the morning, he set 2 places at breakfast before remembering he was alone again. The dining room felt too large. The study felt too empty. The bedroom felt haunted by the one night she'd been there. 1 month after she left, his head of security delivered a report that changed everything. "We traced the leaked photos," Daniel said, laying the folder on Julian's desk. "The photographer was hired by Thomas Brennan." Julian looked up sharply. "The board member?" "Yes, sir. He's been orchestrating a campaign to remove you as CEO. The photos were meant to destabilize your position, make the board question your judgment, your stability. The betrayal should have stung, should have confirmed every cynical belief Julian held about people and their ulterior motives. Instead, he felt nothing but clarity. He'd pushed away the one real thing in his life because he was afraid of ghosts. And in doing so, he'd become one himself. That night, he sat in his study, in the same chair where she'd brought him tea, where she'd asked him why he lived alone, where everything had begun. The moon hung low over the ocean, full and bright, and he could almost hear her voice. "You're not invisible. You're choosing to be." He'd told her once that people disappoint, that silence doesn't. But he'd been wrong. Silence wasn't safe. Silence was just another form of death. He made a decision. The kind of decision that felt reckless and necessary and completely terrifying. The kind of decision that would either save him or finish destroying him. The press conference was announced with less than 12 hours' notice. Journalists scrambled to the Ashford Capitol headquarters, cameras ready, questions prepared, speculation running wild. Julian Ashford never did press conferences. He never explained himself, never apologized, never showed weakness. Whatever this was, it was significant. He stood at the podium in the main conference room. No notes, no script, no lawyers flanking him. Just Julian Ashford, alone, about to do something he'd never done before, tell the truth. "I'm here to set the record straight about recent allegations," he began, his voice steady and clear, carrying across the room full of hungry reporters. "Cassidy Monroe did not manipulate me. She did not seduce me. She did not use me for my money or my name. What she did was far more dangerous. She made me feel human again." Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. The room went silent except for the click of shutters. 3 years ago, I was betrayed by someone I trusted completely. I responded by building walls so high nothing could reach me. Not joy, not pain, not connection. I convinced myself that isolation was strength. That control was power. I was wrong. His hands gripped the podium, knuckles white. Cassidy came into my life asking for nothing but a chance to work. She didn't know who I was. She didn't care about my money. She cared about surviving, about protecting her family, about doing honest work with dignity. And somehow, without trying, without asking for anything, she reminded me what it felt like to be alive. His voice softened, became raw. I pushed her away because I was afraid. Afraid of being hurt again. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of feeling anything real. But the truth is, I lost something far more valuable when I let her walk out of my life. I lost the only person who saw past the billionaire, past the reputation, past the armor I wear every day, and somehow still chose to stay. He looked directly into the camera, his eyes finding the lens like he could see through it to wherever she was. "Cassidy, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was too afraid to fight for us. I'm sorry I chose my walls over your heart. I'm sorry I let fear make my decisions. And I'm asking, no, I'm begging for another chance. Not because I need a maid, not because I'm lonely, but because I love you. And I'd rather risk everything with you than risk nothing alone." He stepped back from the podium. That's all. No questions. The room erupted in chaos, reporters shouting over each other. But Julian was already walking away, his heart hammering, his hands shaking, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life or the first right decision in years. Cassidy saw the conference on her phone during her shift at the cafe. A customer had left their tablet on the counter, the video playing. Her hands shook so hard, she nearly dropped the cup she was holding. Riley called immediately, her voice breathless. "Did you just see?" "I saw." Cassidy whispered, her voice breaking. "What are you going to do?" Before she could answer, the cafe door opened. And there he was, Julian Ashford, in an expensive suit that didn't belong in a place like this, looking completely out of place and completely determined. His eyes found hers across the room, and the whole world narrowed to just the two of them. You came, she breathed, setting down the cup, not caring that customers were staring. You said you'd do anything, he said quietly, walking toward her, closing the distance between them. Well, I'm here to tell you that you don't have to do anything except let me love you. No conditions, no walls, no fear, just us. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple diamond ring. Not too large, not showy, just perfect. Marry me. Not because it makes sense, not because it's practical, but because I can't imagine a single day without you in it. Because you're the only thing that's ever felt real. Because I love you, Cassidy Monroe, and I'm done being afraid of that. Tears streamed down her face. You're sure? Because I can't. I can't do this if you're going to run again. I'm not running. I'm here. I'm all in. And I'm asking you to believe in me one more time. You scared me, she said, her voice shaking. You made me feel seen, and then you disappeared. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He took her hands in his. But you were right. About everything. I was a coward. I was choosing fear over love, walls over truth. But standing here, holding this ring, terrified you'll say no. This is the bravest thing I've ever done. She looked at the ring, at his face, at the man who'd finally torn down his walls. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, holding her like he'd never let go, like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. The cafe erupted in applause from customers who'd witnessed the whole thing, but neither of them noticed. They were too busy kissing, too busy crying, too busy finding their way back to each other. The wedding was small, held on the cliffs overlooking Harrington Bay where everything had begun. Riley stood beside Cassidy, beaming through happy tears, wearing a dress Julian had insisted on buying for her. Margaret stood beside Julian, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled in years. The ocean roared below, wild and beautiful and free. The sky was impossibly blue. And as Julian and Cassidy stood hand in hand, the past finally felt like the past. When Julian said his vows, his voice didn't waver. You walked into my life in a storm, and somehow you became my calm. You saw me when I was invisible even to myself. I promised to never push you away again. I promised to choose us every single day. I promised to be brave enough to love you the way you deserve. Cassidy smiled through her tears. You scared me once. You don't anymore. Not because you're perfect, but because I know now that the strongest thing we can do isn't building walls. It's tearing them down together. I promise to see you always. I promise to stay, even when it's hard. I promise to love you for exactly who you are. They kissed as the sun set over the water, painting everything gold and purple and impossible. Two people who'd been lost finding home in each other. Two people who'd been invisible finally being seen. And in the house on the cliff, where silence once ruled, laughter now echoed through the halls. Riley moved into the East Wing, getting the best medical care money could buy. The photograph on the mantel stood upright now, but next to it was a new one. Julian and Cassidy on their wedding day, smiling like people who'd fought for their happiness and won. The gates that once kept the world out now welcomed it in. The fortress became a home. The billionaire became a husband. The maid became a wife. And the two of them, together, finally learned what it meant to be brave enough to let someone in. Love, they discovered, wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up. It was about choosing someone every day. It was about being vulnerable enough to fall and brave enough to stay fallen. And as they stood together on their cliff, watching the sun set over the Pacific, Julian pulled Cassidy close and whispered, "Thank you for walking through that storm. Thank you for opening the gate," she whispered back. The ocean roared its approval. The sky blushed pink. And two people who'd almost lost each other held on tight, knowing they'd never let go again. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.